I want to thank Eric and Bird and Beckett for graciously providing this space for us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a little audience participation. Lester's going to be 83 years old in 2 days, so a hearty round of applause so we can give him some flowers while he's with us. To my left, to Lester's left, is the great Dylan Chambers, the newest Chambers brother. And he's got his own band, Midnight Transit. They just released a single yesterday.
About a week ago.
About a week ago, yeah. It's racking up hits. But let's get to where we're going here. This was a labor of love. I met Lester Chambers in 2014, and it took us about 8 years to get this done. Early on, I read an article by a professor, Robert Darden. He wrote an essay entitled Heaven's 11, in which he notated in his opinion, 11 greatest gospel recordings of all time, in which he included the Chambers Brothers version of People Get Ready, written by Curtis Mayfield. Not the Impressions version, but the Chambers Brothers version. And so I went on a quest to find Professor Robert Darden, and I found him at Baylor University, where he's a professor of journalism, public relations, and new media. He's the author of People Get Ready, a new history of black gospel music, so on and so on. I wanted to start off by reading his foreword to the book because it really places the Chambers Brothers within the continuum of history accurately, in my opinion. So bear with me, I'm going to try to read this to you. The Chambers Brothers were the Renaissance men of American popular music, equally gifted in gospel, folk, and rock and roll. They could have excelled in any genre, but refused to be limited to just one. Their too short discography is ripe for rediscovery. Filled, groundbreaking, adventuresome takes on several music forms, sometimes in the same song. Their restless creativity simply refused to be bound by the ironclad strictures and formats of radio airplay. As a result, they were ahead of their time and much of their audience. Perhaps the time has indeed come today. In their heyday, brothers George, Joe, Lester, and Willie Chambers brought the gospel of Carthage, Mississippi to unsuspecting white audiences. Steeped in the singing of the great soul shouters, including one of the greatest of them all, Archie Brownlee of the Blind Boys of Mississippi, the brothers taught themselves the incomparable sibling harmony that haunts and drives the greatest of the gospel quartets. That Delta-driven gospel sound permeated everything they recorded and every concert they performed, elevating and transforming the folk music of the day. Only Odetta and Leadbelly could match them, even as it deepened and enriched their forays into rock and roll. This is the true Christian gospel, one with the pomp and circumstance, ritual and canon law stripped away. The gospel built instead on love and acceptance and forgiveness rather than thou shalt not and holier than thou judgment. It is the gospel honed in the slave quarters and brush or hush arbors of slavery and Reconstruction. The whites called it primitive, but what it was in truth was and is far closer to the first century Christian church of the immediate followers of Jesus than any other denomination, black or white, could truly claim. Only the Chambers Brothers of Carthage could have pulled off the lyrics of Time Has Come Today so fully, so convincingly, and artists who hadn't grown up in the Mississippi of the 1940s and 1950s couldn't have believably sung, "Oh my Lord, I have to roam. Hey, I have no home. Hey, I have no home." Because in reality, the brothers had no home. They were too rock for folk, too secular for gospel, and too raw, real, and passionate for rock. 50 years later, critics and DJs still try to unsuccessfully to pigeonhole the band and their most famous song, psychedelic rock, psychedelic soul, funk rock. But whenever a filmmaker needs a song that not just captures an era, but can also add a palpable, thrilling urgency to a scene, they invariably turn to Time Has Come Today. One of the first vinyl purchases I can remember making was the double-sided Time Has Come Today and People Get Ready 45 RPM disc after hearing it on Armed Forces Radio while my father was stationed at Itazuki Air Force Base in southern Japan in 1968. I immediately loved Time Has Come Today, but it was People Get Ready that transported me. Growing up in the military where so many of my friends were black, I heard gospel music on a daily basis, rushing in and out of each other's houses, hearing moms and dads sing Mahalia Jackson, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, the Dixie Hummingbirds, the Clara Ward Singers. Gospel became and remains the soundtrack of my life. But the Chambers Brothers' rendition of Curtis Mayfield's eternal classic simply astounded me on first listen. Still does. In their a cappella harmonies, I heard both the loss and triumph of enslaved people and a wellspring of soulfulness, pain, and joy that prompted a lifelong journey to find other artists who could replicate that deep passion. I still have that battered 45. It has been played so many times on cheap record players that it shines like a mirror under fluorescent lights. There have been many extraordinary versions of People Get Ready, but this one remains my favorite. I don't know why the Chambers Brothers aren't spoken of today in the same tones of awe and respect as some of their contemporaries. Perhaps it is because their recorded output is so limited. Perhaps because they still, as they most certainly did then, challenge the casual fan of what folk music should sound like, what gospel should sound like, what rock and roll should sound like. Perhaps they were too intense, too passionate, too real, and too other for the average fan. Pity their loss. This is soul music. When I hear their full tilt, no holds barred version of I Can't Turn You Loose, if I do, I'll lose my mind, I believe them. I can't say that about many songs or many artists. A detailed biography of the Chambers Brothers is not only overdue, it's criminally overdue. Like Sly and the Family Stone, or Andre Crouch and the Disciples, to name the other two racially mixed groups of the day, their music still confronts listeners. This isn't lowest common denominator music. There is nothing common about it. This isn't children's music. This is music for adults. This isn't music tied to a certain date or a certain place. This is music for now. The time has come today. Period. Full stop. I apologize for the length of that. As far as no applause. Dylan's going to speak next. Then Lester's going to speak, and then we're going to open it up for questions if you care to ask questions. So I yield the mic to Dylan Chambers.
Thank you, Brother T. Watts. I just want to thank everybody for being here, and want to thank Burton Beckett for having us and celebrating my father, Lester. He's going to be 83 in 2 days. I can't believe it. Yeah, he had me when he was 45. I'm 37 now. So this year I'll be turning 38 and he'll be 83. So it'll be our the last. Yeah. I can't think of the word for that, but I know there's a word for that. I grew up in a musical family, rocking and rolling with my dad, and didn't realize until I was a little bit older that wasn't normal, right? Like I assumed everybody just grew up with amazing, talented musicians in their family. And we also grew up really poor because the Chambers Brothers didn't get any royalties until I want to say like the early '90s was when the first time they got a royalty check. So their music would be used on commercials, would be in movies, and people would, it was almost a shame to tell people because people assumed, where's the money? Aren't you guys getting paid for the music being used? And the record company, the music industry is, as some of you might know, it's very corrupt. And what the Chambers Brothers brought back in the day was so far ahead of its time and so unique that it was really hard for labels to package them and pigeonhole them, which they try to do with so many other artists. And unlike their counterparts, a lot of white artists in the day, white artists have the luxury and the freedom to have whatever unique sound that they wanted to and still, really excel. Whereas with black artists, oftentimes they wanted them to be specifically soul, specifically gospel, specifically this type of R&B. And there was very few black acts that were rock bands, right? And the Chambers Brothers were probably one of the first interracial rock bands to perform, tour, change the game. So it's really powerful to be a part of this legacy and this family, and to be able to help Lester share his message with his book. And Brother Watts and Lester have been working together for quite a while to really put something magical together here and tell Lester's story. And some people just want the juicy gossip of his life, but I think a lot of other people appreciate the historical stories and the conversation that Lester's having with this book, and sharing his life and sharing his legacy and a lot of the things that he's gone through to become the legend that he is today. So it's an honor, and I think Dad wants to say a few things and talk a little bit to y'all, and maybe jam on some harp if he feels up to it.
Hello. Thank you, Brother Bill and Brother Thurman. I would like to say that it is indeed a pleasure to be here with you on such a great evening. Every evening in my life is great, but when I do something like this with people, it becomes a very special great. And as Dylan said, all the years we worked, we were told by the record company, which is then Columbia Records, which is now Sony, we were told we were misfits. We didn't belong. We were a disgrace. We were told all those things.
I got to jump in here to continue the conversation and share something. When the original Time Has Come, most people don't know this, when the original Time Has Come Today album cover was set to come out, the label was going to have 5 white guys on the cover and sell the song as white artists singing it and not as the Chambers Brothers. And they fought and fought and fought for that not to happen. And the label was just, we can't have black people, I'm sure they used a lot more colorful language.
They did. Starting with an N.
Yeah. We can't have black people singing this type of music to a white audience of rock and roll, talking about time has come today for young hearts to go their way. It was too radical of a song.
We got to sell records in the South.
We got to sell records in the South. And that's this point, the Chambers Brothers stopped doing the Chitlin circuit. They were like, we're not going to go back down and play segregated shows. We want to play shows for everybody. We don't want to have the feeling of people separated and not being able to dance and be free together. But that's just mind-blowing to think that the label was going to put 5 white guys on the album cover and release that song as a different artist band than the Chambers Brothers and not let them get credit for this magical song that they had written. And another thing about that song, they weren't supposed to even record it. So they had their engineer and their producers in the studio purposely save 13 minutes, 15 minutes of tape after they had recorded everything that was scheduled to be on the album. And then once all the bigwigs had left the studio, the Chambers Brothers recorded that song in one take because that's all they had. They only had tape to do that take one time. So everything you hear in the original Time Has Come Today was the Chambers Brothers doing that all in one take to produce that magical music.
Live. right here for you today. Anyway, I done forgot where I was.
Sorry, I jumped in there. I had to share that. It's very important, right?
It's important.
It's
Everything is important.
It's important to know that they weren't supposed to record that album, and after it was done and the label saw it was a hit, they're like, okay, we're going to pitch this to a white band so a white band can sing this rock and roll psychedelic song.
Anyway,
Glad you all stood up for yourselves and did not let that happen.
hey, if you don't stand up, they're going to push you over. So anyway, what I'm saying here is that they told the entire, our album would come out like anybody else's album, and it would have XXXXXXX, which means to the DJs, don't play. No words had to be written, just a simple X. Time Has Come Today was not supposed to ever be played to any audience, and we were told that by the president of Columbia Records. We will never allow this music to be heard on radio. Thank God for hippies. Thank God for San Francisco, where the hippies came from. They actually came, I'm saying we because I am totally a hippie and wouldn't have it no other way. I dedicated my life to being real, free, and honest. And I'm still that way today. We were told that we never recorded a record that was suitable for AM play or FM play, so they never played any of our records. And now the DJs never got them. Then when we did decide to record other albums, other tunes from other groups, mainly the Motown groups, stuff like that, we did a couple of songs that had been recorded and were great hits. And we had one that was going to be a hit, and a letter was written to Columbia Records, and it was forwarded to all the DJs throughout the world. If you play this song, you will never ever get another record from Motown. Yes. And what can you do? Except say, well, hey, we got knocked down again. But we kept getting up. We actually, after all of the years of all this hard work I've done, it doesn't seem fitting, but I still have to work to survive, to live. Today, I have a job. I have to work to pay my rent. We share that, my brother, my son and me, and his lovely wife. But who would think, after all those records we made, we only got one gold record. Out of all the records we made, we only got one gold record, which was Time Has Come Today. And there you can see the president standing like this, leaning over, handing it to us. Of course, the album is in this hand, and he's like, don't want my face in this picture. But we got up from that, and we were told over and over and over that we were misfits. We didn't belong. Why don't you go sing the blues? Well, we came from the gospel. Gospel is the blues. Instead of you calling God your baby, you call him God. You say, I love him the same way. It means the same thing. Well, after all these years, I'm still just what I am. Nothing more than a hope to get over artist. And I love it. because I get to be with people like you. Now, this book that I wrote, I tell you what, it was the hardest thing that I ever attempted to do. Especially, I can write, but I didn't write. There's not one note in this book that you're going to read that I read on paper first. It all came from me talking on the microphone, just like I'm talking to you. And my good brother here, thank you, Mr. Thurman Watts, took my words and straightened them out and made them presentable to you, just like making a record. Once you make the record, the engineer has to take it through the mixing process to make it presentable. We didn't have that luxury when we were making records. We had none of that. We made the record, and that's all the time we had. We had a budget. Trust me, and believe me, it's true. We had a total budget of $19,000. And if you could do a record in a day with that kind of a budget. So we learned everything we had to do. And we recorded live. Every song on that record, Time Has Come Today, is one take. Every one take. And that's all the time we had to do that. This book is a one take.
Except for those 100 pages that when my computer crashed and hey, you're not supposed to say how the sauce is made, okay?
And it took us approximately 8 years to do this, but then I had some severe health problems during these times, and then we had COVID. So about 6 of these 8 years went to waste because we couldn't work. We couldn't be together. We couldn't communicate other than what I did on the tape. And thank God again for Mr. Thurman Watts here.
Thank God. Yeah.
Bless his heart. He's deacon of a church too, and chosen for the purpose that no lies would be printed in this book. No lies. This is all honest stuff. Everything you read in this book did happen. And once again, there's no juice to this book because that's personal. And the juice goes to the movie.
To be determined.
To be determined. And I thought, if you're going to write a book, don't put everything you want in the movie in the book, if there ever is a movie. Save some of it. So, oh, wow, I did it, yeah. So, make surprise, So anyway, this is probably longer than I have ever talked.
Are you kidding me?
At any given such situation or setting of this any kind, this is actually my first book signing. Every time, and I've never been to anybody else's book signing, and now I have to come to mine, and I love it. I am probably, and I will say that over and over and over, and if you see me next year, I'll probably say the same thing. I am probably the most blessed man in America. One of, for sure. So saying that, I'm gonna doodle a little for you on my harmonica. My guitar player was going to come, but he just returned off of a boat cruise at which, upon docking the boat, they realized that half the people on the boat had come down with COVID. So he couldn't come. He didn't want to come today because he didn't want to endanger anybody. And I am a dangerous person when it comes to COVID. I can't have COVID. I thank you all for your agreeing to wear a mask and sit with us and listen to me go on and stuff. And then I'm going to play this little harmonica a little bit. And then we're going to
Do some ask some questions and answers.
questions and answers. How about that? Is that okay? Yeah. I didn't realize it takes so much wind. Takes so much wind to do that. Yeah.
So the floor is open for questions. Don't everybody talk at once.
Anybody? Questions?
Yes.
Well, Dylan, you were mentioning about the deception with the record company, but that was like Bobby Caldwell, much in the 70s. With
Yeah.
Bobby Caldwell, they still were doing it all the way up into R&B popular music time.
Mhm.
He just passed away, God bless his soul, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like those are just a couple. Nobody's really probably knows that story now that you're telling it, but everyone's kind of remembers Bobby Caldwell. But I wonder how many times they did that. The music industry executives did that.
There's probably
In
way.
everything.
Yeah. Especially
You
for.
mean not putting his picture on the cover? Is that what you're talking
The
about?
one, yeah, the
Yeah.
idea
Yeah.
came, even
Yeah.
back then,
Mhm.
to misrepresent the music,
Right,
the
right.
musicians, and they did that. And I remember I was in high school when that Bobby Caldwell thing came, and we were like, what?
Really?
So that just reminded me of that story that was recently brought up.
Well, these people call me record. They're called record executives. They should be called record thieves. Because it's amazing how I went on tour with a group called the Tut Band. Tell Us the Truth. We went all across America. We were protesting the fact that they don't pay musicians properly was number one. So me thinking of it, I stepped up and said when it come my time to speak, I said, you know, it's amazing how much money you guys spend on making a record for us, with us. And before we get any kind of return, we have to pay you back all the money you spent on making the record, plus. And then you give us 3% of the record and expect us to pay you. So this takes years and years for a group to start earning money for their labor. So I came up with the idea of telling them, you guys are just like sharecroppers in Mississippi. You treat musicians the same way that you do sharecroppers. You work them the whole year and take all the credit for the great cotton, for the beautiful corns, for the bags of beans. You take the credit. Look at what came from my farm. We did this. Not you, but you got credit for it. So I said, so you treat us like sharecroppers. You give us 3% of a dollar, and then we have to pay you back out of that. What's left? And I have said so many times, over and over and over, if a smart law firm came together and decided to take this to court and sue record companies, the first would be, in my mind, one of the number one guys to get it would be Jimmy Reed. The whole world of musicians have lived and made a living, great livings, record companies, off Jimmy Reed. His music is in everything you hear. I was once sitting in a hamburger stand in New York City. There were three guys sitting close enough for me to hear them talk, and I just listened. And they were talking about the financial department for RCA Records. And they said in conversation, I heard them say that our girl, Bessie Smith, Lena Horne, and these people has paid for the whole properties of RCA 3 times over in 1 year. They're making a profit. And there's these families. They don't even know what happened. They don't even know it's happening. We need to. I'm writing a song that's called, I've already written it, Do You Want a Party? And it's about a group of musicians that's going to sit and explain things like this in a rap form, so people can hear this, because that's what they're listening to, you know. So I figure if I bring this song to them in that manner, they might hear this, because it's going to get played. We're going to make sure of that, right, Dill?
Sure enough.
Right, T-Watch? Right, Dre? I'd like to, for you that don't know it, this is my oldest son, Andre. And he's also, this is his lovely wife. And this is her lovely sister. This is, yeah. And,
Anybody have another question?
yeah, I could talk now. I got started. See you again.
Is there anything, I mean, I know you thought of this 1,000 times, but is there any way that the record companies can be forced to repay you, or can be cajoled to repay you at all?
Well, you know, I have hired several different law firms. His mother is a paralegal, purposely to find out why we were treated this way by the music companies. And once she found out everything, I went to Congress 3 years in a row to speak to Congress about this situation.
This was when Napster was happening.
Yes. And at the last meeting I went to, this one guy stood up in the back of the, and not in the back, but in the audience. He had a briefcase and papers, and he stood up and he said, "Mr. Chambers, I know where there's several $1 million that belong to you and your brothers, but we don't know how to get it to you." Ain't that something? You had my...
Here's your money order.
Thank you. Cash, check, or money order. My address is. Been the same for 30 years. Why can't you get that through your head? Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Hey, Richard.
What about the influence as yourself, which you've done for musicians like me?
Right.
It gave me the life that money can't buy. Not
Well-
record deals, not golden records, or any of that stuff. But what you have done to me in the music business made me the musician that I am. Because of you, Lester, I'm proud owner of the Latin Rock Mural House that you're in front
Right on.
with my family.
Thank you, brother.
I was 12 years old when I met you,
Oh, okay.
backstage at the Fillmore with Janis Joplin, the Big Brother, and the Holding Company.
Right.
People always ask me, Richard, I don't see a gold album.
Yeah.
What's success to you? I'll tell you what success is to me. When I was 12 years old, I went to go see the Chambers Brothers at the Fillmore. And I idolized this man. He was my hero. And now I have the opportunity to be on stage with him,
Right.
one-on-one, to be able to sit next to you.
Yeah.
Come on, Pop.
Yes.
Father and son getting it done. That's fame. That's fortune. That's reality. Not the contract, not the record deal, but what you have done to somebody like me. That money cannot buy. And that's why I'm here, Pop.
Thank you, Richard.
And
This is another of my sons, Richard Segovia.
yeah. I live in Latin Rock Mural House.
The Latin House,
Pop
yeah.
is right here, right up in front. One of my biggest heroes and one of my biggest idols.
You should go by and see this house. It is incredible, and it is, you could almost say that every Latin group
Yeah,
that came out of San Francisco,
right,
that went anywhere from San Francisco, went to his house,
right. We also, it's the Latin Rock Mural House.
Mural
in
House.
Santana and Malo.
25th and York.
But it was people like him that influenced me to make all of these wonderful things happen. So, to me, no album, no record deal would ever take the place of what this man has done for me.
Well, thank you,
Thank you,
Richard.
Lester.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless you, brother. And
Just to add to that, that's a common. It's a very special and
wow.
very powerful thing, and that is what what Richard just said is what and why we do what we do, right? And why Dad continues to do what he does, because like that connection that music brings, the money's great, it's nice to be comfortable, but changing hearts and lives and
Saving lives.
yeah, with music and
And making people happy.
Oh, that's what
those
we're
experiences.
You know what it means to me to have one person come forward like you did, Richard? It gives me 10 years to go on.
Well, Pop, it's because I
It
love you.
gives me life. It
mean
brings
the world
life
to
to
me.
me.
You mean the world to me.
And what you do means the world to me and others. To be honest with yourself, in love with yourself, to be honest, to be true to others, and to help others shouldn't be a hard thing to do. But today, people had rather not help one or another. This world is headed into a very, 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 very bad place. Music, by the way, music is the greatest relief for stress, the greatest relief for pain, the greatest relief for sadness, loneliness. Music will set a wild animal free. I've seen dogs dance. Yeah. I've seen the cows in the pasture, bro.
Yeah.
They'll do it. Trust me, they will do this. Yeah. And music is the only thing that God gave us that we can call our own, that we didn't have to learn from somebody else. But as you can see, that guy that learned that music from being in the cotton field in places like ours, we were overpowered by people like, I used to do maybe 30, 40 harmonica sessions a week. I mean, not a week, a year. And then they decided, let's write a chart. Let's write a chart for this harp. And then very few harmonica players got to work. And they learned that chart. I know it now, but I didn't then. But my harmonica session stuff went from 30 a year to 0 maybe once a year. Now it's nothing for the last 20 years. Nothing. You know, and I've heard so many different people say it's harmonica, but it has no soul, because it's written. Harmonica wasn't made to have charts.
It was made to share the soul.
It was made to come from your soul. You improvise.
Wow.
It's an instant creation. I never play the same thing twice. It's always, I'm always looking and searching for what am I going to play here. You know, and there it is. It's there. This is the littlest, smallest instrument. Mono. It has 10 reeds. 10 reeds. And if you learn the 10 reeds of the harmonica, you can play with anybody. But what people don't know is all music came from the blues. All music came from the blues. From people moaning and groaning and suffering and begging for freedom, for life, for food. I remember when me and my brothers used to go to the train station every Saturday. And we would sit out wait till the train to come. And when the train come, we would sing. They never gave us anything silver, but we got a lot of copper.
That what they did saved them and their family, because they were able to perform. You know, picture it. 1940. My dad was born in rural Mississippi to a sharecropping family, where the Grand Wizard was the mayor of the town. Owned the town. Okay, so
he was the town.
You know, I never got to meet my grandfather, but I always would hear stories of how. And we went by years ago and saw where they grew up, where they were raised in Mississippi, and their shack is probably a third of this, maybe a fourth of the size of this building. It was literally a one-room shack where they had one bed in the middle of the, not even like an actual bed, just like a straw bed that they would all take turns sleeping and sharing, and a stove in the middle, like one of those old black stoves. You put the wood in it, and you cook on top of it. And
grew up like
the stories that they had of how great this place was like, I thought that it was like going to be a big home, and I'm like, this is where you guys, and we're like, yeah, this was This was huge to us. We had shelter. We had a place to sleep and to live and have some kind of safety. And my grandfather would spend his nights in the rocking chair in the front of the house with a loaded shotgun and dogs by his side to just protect his family from the night raids that would happen on a regular basis of the KKK. Imagine growing up that energy, that trauma, that fear, that hatred from others that you don't know why they're directing that towards you, and then being able to channel it into something as beautiful as singing and performing like they did. And that's what got them out of Mississippi and out of the South, was they had a voice and they had power together, and people saw that and wanted to come, engage with what they did. And Dad got out of Mississippi when he was like 12 years old and 14 years old, and they never looked back, and were able to move to Los Angeles, go to school, start performing at a really young age. I mean, he was at 24, 25 years old, or he was like at the Newport Folk Festival. That's crazy, right? Like, to think of, he's 20, my uncles are 22, 24, 26. Like, that's wild what they accomplished from where they were to and were able to bring. And it was just real energy and music that just changed the world. And it's unfortunate that so many other bands will get credit for the music that they did, but that's okay, because we know that when someone like Richard connects with us, we know that music really resonated and changed lives. So that's the beauty of the Chambers Brothers.
Yes.
We opened a lot of doors
Yeah,
for a lot of bands.
a lot of bands.
I mean, I remember Pop telling me that they even have Pop. Do you know any other bands that are out there that
Yes.
used to be? And Pop played a lot of bands.
Well, they asked,
Huh?
Columbia Records would ask, do you guys know any white bands that play like you do? And we said, no, there's none. There's none. But we know Janis Joplin.
Right,
We know Santana.
right.
We know
Jimi Hendrix.
Jimi Hendrix. We know people like this. So they brought them around, and they all got contracts and got paid.
You know,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
it's
I
amazing.
mean, I could say that I know a man that played on the Ed Sullivan Show
Yeah.
Three times.
3 times. Isn't that amazing?
Johnny Carson twice.
Wow.
Mac Douglas 4 times.
Shindig.
All in the book. All in the book.
The Chambers Brothers were the reason Shindig sold.
I got to say right here that Chef Anthony Bourdain, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes.
Yeah. He tells a story. He was interviewed saying that when he was living in the Caribbean, he was using drugs and drinking alcohol to excess. And every night, he would do a mind game with himself as he was driving in the Caribbean. He was coming around a hairpin turn, and if the DJ played the wrong song, he would maybe harm himself. So the night that he was at the end of his rope, he made the declaration that if the DJ doesn't play the right song, I'm just going to drive right off this doggone cliff.
Right. True.
And
True that.
Time Has Come Today came on,
Right.
and he laughed.
He put on the brakes.
He laughed through that
What
near-death experience.
am
And
I
lived to
doing?
tell about it. It's in the book.
It's in the book, yes. So anyway,
Any other questions?
yes,
Where do you fall with your siblings, with your brothers? Are you the middle, the oldest?
I'm in the middle.
Oh, the middle.
Yes.
Uncle George, who is no longer with us, then Uncle Willie, then Lester, then Uncle Joe.
So there's 3.
4.
There's three left. Three
with,
left.
with us still now, but there was 4 in total.
In the entire family, there was 8 boys and 5 girls. We had a house full.
And there was more than one singing group contained therein. I got to say, I went to the Chambers family reunion back in whatever year that was, 2018,
Yeah.
whatever year that was.
A year or 2 before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It feels
And
like
to,
so long ago.
and to see the Chambers family assembled, 50 strong, women playing drums, etc. And to hear that choir singing, what was it, King's Highway? Lord have mercy! I thought I was in heaven.
That's what I was saying. I grew up, and everybody, like, you'd go to a family reunion, everybody could play an instrument. There was 8 guitar players, 3 people playing bass, drums, percussion everywhere. Everybody singing in Grandma's house. And then you'd go to some other friend's house, and you'd be like, "Y'all don't get together and sing? Y'all can't sing? What's going on here, right? This doesn't seem normal."
But as strange as it was, you know, I have all, as he said, I have all these nephews and nieces that are great musicians, great singers, and have knocked on every door in the music business. And now, I don't know, but I'm thinking maybe the name Chambers it has a juju on it or something. Mojo. Because it would seem to me that somewhere or another there would be one of these great kids that's a relative of mine would have gotten into the music business. None of them has been accepted, except my son. And my son. And my son. You know? And I am in the process now of putting together a budget so I can record my legacy album and bring it to you. And you can go, if you have any donations, you can go to Sweet Relief, and they accept donations for me. And I'm working hard to save a little money here and there. The CD that Dre and I did together with on Jimmy Reed, the tribute to Jimmy Reed, it took us a long time to do that because we didn't have a budget. Nobody would give us a budget. And like I said, I still have to work to pay the rent.
That Jimmy Reed album was taken to great lengths in terms of how it was recorded, and I think Andre should describe the links that you went through to produce that album, man, because you recreated
Miracle.
You recreated the instruments. I can't pull the mic to happen.
Come on, Dre. Okay. My son.
Hi, everybody. So this Jimmy Reed record is outstanding, if I might say so myself. What we did is we went back and did a full study on how they recorded Jimmy Reed in the very beginning. So we tried to kind of duplicate that in our own studio, and we got real close. So the recording techniques in 1956 were a little different than they are now. But we got real close to that. So when you get the opportunity to listen to it, get your hands on it, it's classic.
And there's only so many printed, right?
Yeah, it's only if it right, exactly. For now.
For now.
There's only 100 printers.
We have some here.
We have
Any other questions from anybody? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chambers, you introduced yourself as a hippie. Not a small thing, and we thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Right, absolutely. A number of things roll through my mind right now. One of them is, in that moment, whatever one makes of it, in the middle 60s, the so-called summer of love that unfolded, so-called. By that time, they were just about to start running the Greyhound bus tours through the Ashbury. But there was still something very original. You could still go to the Panhandle and hear the Dead and a number of other people, Steve Miller for free. You know,
Right.
it was the time
they were the times.
They
And I'm
they
wondering-
actually.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I just wondered, in this region, did you ever have a face-to-face conversation with Chet Helms?
Yes.
Do you recall kindly Cam PX and Tom Donahue? You know, you think about it, that only lasted about 6 or 7 months.
Yeah.
That, you know, that was a really anti-corporate move. That was a very bold thing. And Tom Donahue played your music on his station. And he played Leonard Cohen and Joni Mitchell and Tim Buckley.
John Baez,
You know,
Richie
You know,
Havens.
it was there.
Yes.
You know, this unusual step from AM to FM and all that. So I just wondered if you, by any chance, recall anything of those people. And I thought, you know, I think the world of John Helms, who's alive to this day, not well, unfortunately.
Right.
But John and Chet and the brother who's in Hawaii, James,
Right, James.
you know, they had an unusual dad,
Right.
a very unusual father who died too young,
Yeah.
stayed loyal to his migrant workers and to the people of the little factory towns he represented in Southern California, would not sell out,
Yeah.
would not turn his back on Mexican Americans or
Right.
poor white labor or the Native Americans, you know, and so I just wondered if you had any recollections of conversations with those people, and then separate from that, 2 other areas. One, briefly, did you have any interaction with Robbie Krieger at all? Because he did write about you in his book.
Right.
And the last part of this is, what about Barry Gordy? Did Barry Gordy give you any support?
It's in the book.
Yeah.
That was a lot. No, I'm sorry.
Well,
Chet Helms.
Chet Helms and my brothers and I were actually brothers like brothers. We knew each other very well. We spent many hours after shows hanging out, and you know why. And we spent many days at the same venues during the concert times. And I don't remember any of the conversations we had, but we were really good friends. Robbie Krieger and the Doors, we were also great friends. And unfortunately, we got separated because at one point in our career, we toured with like Jimi Hendrix, Jim Morrison,
The Doors.
Janis Joplin, the Chambers Brothers. It was a package that went from place to place to place. And the promoters saw this. No place, we didn't go to any place, regardless of how big it was, there was never enough room. Then the promoters saw the greed and realized that they could put the Chambers Brothers here, they could put Janis Joplin over there, they could put Jimi Hendrix over here, and we all 3 would sell out at our own venue. But it separated us from being friends right through the end, which was a very sad thing because we were the group of musicians that said, we don't want dressing rooms, put us a tent behind the stage. That's what started the tent behind the stage where all the bands would hang out. All the food would be brought to one table. But like I say, they agreed from promoters agreeing, you take them to San Diego, I'll take them to San Francisco. You take them to. I forget about the man. You take them to Washington, and we'll have 4 times the amount of money in one night. And not thinking about what it would mean to have us all together. We were like such a lovely package. And Jim Morrison was just way too smart for the world. Way too smart. That was one of the smartest hippies I ever met.
I met
Other than Owsley himself.
the first time I met Robbie Krieger, we was at Eric Burden's 60th birthday party.
Yeah.
At I think it's called the El Capitan in Los Angeles, and
Theater, yeah.
we I had a couple joints on me backstage, and I was like puff. Well, it's legal now. It's legal. And Eric Burden comes running around the corner, and he's like, "Hey, man." And I was like, "Oh, shoot, should I not be smoking?" He's like, No, you bring those joints. Come with me." And we went and smoked with Robbie Krieger and Eric Burden, and everybody wanted to get lit before they went on stage. So that was pretty cool. And then I got to chit-chat and ask some questions of Robbie, and, ask him some fond memories and, what it was like to rock and roll back in the day. And he was like, "Man, it's like an era that will never will never happen again. It was like the moment of all of these amazing musicians able to be together and make music."
But when the promoters separated us, I don't think they had a clue of what kind of results were going to come from it. But it just tore the whole music world apart as far as unity in the groups. And then we got booked with all kinds of groups that we had no kind of we didn't know them, And for a moment it was like, should we go or should we stay home? But then
Only a brief moment.
Only a brief moment. But then the cities and the states all came together, and they put a stench on everything the musicians did. Now there's dogs backstage, marijuana dogs. You couldn't get high backstage. That was sad. That was real sad. You had to come high and hope to stay high.
Come high, hope to stay high. That's a good
Yeah.
one.
And there was nothing in the world as good as yet as Acapulco Gold. Nothing.
Did we get all your questions?
Barry Gordy.
Very Gordy.
Very good.
And I know the answer no.
Anyway,
Anybody else have a question?
I just have a comment. I want to
Yeah.
thank you for the book so much. It's done in a format where there are a series of interviews with people as well that it was interesting to see.
right.
It details the stories of the Chambers brothers growing up in the South as kind of the family, different brothers singing with different groups and then coming together, and the same thing happening when you go to L.A. The story of the mayor, the owner, is a great story. The stories of Newport in '65,
Yeah.
which I was at.
All right.
Wow.
All right.
The stories which I was surprised to see lately. It ends with the Summer of Soul.
Yes.
In that session, which I had no idea you were part of that, which was wonderful.
Yes.
And also the stories of the gospel pieces, the getting together with. I'm curious about your relationship with Barbara Dane and that whole aspect. I have a couple of the recordings of the Chambers Brothers with Barbara Dane. I'm hoping you got royalties from some of that. But I don't know if she got royalties either.
Oh, she got rich.
She got rich.
She got rich.
Well,
Yes.
she's around. Go get her.
She lives in a mansion.
And then the story of the session with Dylan after Newport, where you recorded behind his Highway 61
Yes.
Visited album, and understanding that there's a way you can actually hear that recording, that it is
Right.
available.
Right.
Although, in the vein of Columbia Records, of course, they didn't record. They cut out the Chambers Brothers.
Right. They took us. After the tapes were done, the engineer listened to it and said, "Well, you know," to Bob Dylan, he said to Bob Dylan, "This is not going to be your album. It's going to be the Chambers Brothers album. Listen to you and listen to them." You see?
What's the keyboard player's name?
Al Cooper.
Al Cooper.
We talked to Al Cooper, and Al Cooper said that they only had room between the Chambers Brothers and Mike Bloomfield's guitar. They didn't have room for both, so the producer chose Bloomfield over the Chambers Brothers. And while I have the mic, I want to read this Berry Gordy story.
I need a break.
This is the Berry Gordy story. After woodshedding for several months, we went back to New York and became. I'm sorry. After woodshedding for several months, we went back to New York. I'm so blind, that's part of it. And became the house band at Ondine's. We wore matching sharkskin suits every night and became very popular with long lines stretching around the block every night. We became the in thing in New York, and at one point we referred the Doors to the owners at Ondine's. One night while performing there, a throng of African American people came in. This had never happened before, and we were quite happy about it. We didn't know who it was, but it turned out to be Berry Gordy and Diana Ross with an entourage. They sat through the whole show and really enjoyed it. After the show, we went backstage and changed into our street clothes, which were probably our Mississippi hippie attire in origin and style. When we came out, Berry Gordy was there and said, "Hey, I'm Berry Gordy. I'm here to meet the Chambers Brothers." "Well, we're the Chambers Brothers," we chimed. "No, I wanted to meet the Chambers Brothers that were on stage." Apparently, he didn't recognize us in the street clothes. "We are the Chambers Brothers that were on stage." Berry Gordy then told us of his imminent plans for expanding his record company called Motown and his desire for us to be a part of it. The money he was offering was less than the money we were already making. Nonetheless, when he asked us to meet him in his limo parked outside while he paid his tab, we went to the limo and waited. When he came to the car with Diana Ross, the door was opened for her, and as she started to get in, she gasped, "Oh my God, who are these niggers in my car?"
That's Diana Ross for you right there.
Yeah, yeah. Any more questions?
I don't know if it's in the book or not, but well, Dowd's in the restroom. The Chambers Brothers recorded on one of their later albums. I think it's on Unbonded. They recorded a Supreme song, reflections of the way love used to be. And Diana Ross told every studio, every record, every DJ radio station, if you play their version over mine, you will never get another song from me again. So that it was done very dirty on her part. But knowing that she used the hard R to call the Chambers Brothers while we were in her limo, that tells you who the kind of person she is.
After all, I'm going to be 83 in 2 days. So.
We'll talk about birthdays. I had the opportunity to have Lester Chambers' pop birthday, 80th birthday at the house, remember?
Yep.
And man, Rolls Royce is parked outside. There was this guy with a camera while we were playing in the music room, rolling around the floor with his camera, going crazy. I said, "Pop, who's that?" He goes, "It's Snooky Flowers."
Oh, man.
Remember, Pop? Yeah.
Rest in peace, Snooky.
Yeah, he was rolling around my music room.
COVID got him.
Yeah, remember? And then I go upstairs, and I'm with Dre, and I see a big guy sitting on my couch. I said, "Dre, who's that?"
And I didn't recognize it because you put on some weight,
He
right?
put on a lot of weight.
Trey goes, that's Taj Mahal. They broke my couch.
I went,
Remember, Bob? Bob
Yeah.
and Snooki broke my couch. I should have kept it and sent it to the Smithsonian. You know what I mean?
right.
No, man, that was a piece of history for my house. To be able to have Lady Bianca.
Yes.
Lady
She
Bianca.
was there. I mean, it was
Yes.
a day to remember, man.
Quite a day.
It was so, that his house was so full of people. There was like you had to like do this to, and everybody that you're shuffling by is famous, right?
Even in the backyard, you know.
Backyard, yeah.
And one of the things I would like to comment on now, as you had said earlier, is the joy is knowing people like that, the joy of what I do and what people do
Yeah.
is knowing you and people like you.
Thank you, Pop.
That makes this whole thing worthwhile. And it gives you the go-ahead reason, even if you ain't got no money.
Well, you inspired me.
There's
You've inspired me, Bob.
And,
You made me a stand-up guy.
Thank
You know,
you.
you've done a lot for me without even knowing it.
Well,
That's what made it,
yes.
The hardest part I got right now is, man, I can't stay away from that fried chicken.
oh man.
Fried chicken.
At 83, he still gets some fried chicken every now and then. I can't keep him away from it, but we try to eat as healthy as we can. But you gotta have fried chicken and collard greens every now and then. For Lester's birthday, we're gonna do a special, and the books signed are all gonna be $20 today. So if anybody wants to get a couple, this is the chance to get.
Happy birthday, Pop.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lester. Happy birthday to you. We love you, Daddy-O.